Hello, friends, and welcome to the Interworld podcast, where we explore the intersection of personal and collective transformation. My name is Yasha S. Wagner, and I'm a PhD researcher in the field of psychology, well-being, and spirituality, as well as the founder of the Interworld Institute for Inner World Peace. You can learn more about our nonprofit initiatives by going to interworld.org. Today, I have the great honor and privilege of being joined by a dear friend and soul brother of mine, Robbie Lenfestey. Robbie is an incredible being that is very hard to summarize in an intro. Robbie has a very rich life story and a ton of amazing accomplishments. Among those, Robbie and I were together in Lebanon, co-facilitating a retreat in Lebanon over a year ago. And Robbie is also the founder of Mandala Springs, which is a land-based community center in Asheville, North Carolina, that has been doing a lot of work with hurricane relief for the population there. So we'll be getting into that and all of Robbie's other amazing gifts and contributions to our world. So without further ado, here's my interview with Robbie Lenfestey. Robbie.
How's it going, Yash? Good to see you.
Good to see you, brother. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
You are Lenfestey.
Lenfestey, great. I'll
Little
also have...
fascinating,
Yeah, go
little
ahead.
fascinating thing there is Lenfestey is Gaelic, and it literally translates into life of the festivities or celebration of life. So I was born with a fairly tall order and some pretty big shoes to fill, but I feel like I'm doing a fairly admirable job of living up to it.
I'll have to second that. I would say that there's few better descriptions for you than life of the party in some sense. So one of the many things we can relate on, I'm sure. I also am going to have to get used to pronouncing Mandala Springs because I'm on the board of another center that pronounces it Mandala Center. So Mandala Springs is really a great topic to get into, but I want to start more first with your personal story because I know I just barely scratched the surface with that intro. So why don't we just start open-ended, and there'll be so much that we can get into, but let's just start with a little bit about your background and your journey and how you've come to do what you do in life.
Excellent. Well, I think it's important to note that I started with a lot of social anxiety and overweight as a teenager, and very depressed and not very deeply connected to the root of myself. You know, it was always multifaceted and had a lot of these skills, but there wasn't really much of a social world that I could really fit into. So that created a lot of isolation for me. And so, that was pretty much the worst part. Like in my junior year in high school, I had severe meningitis and was near death in the hospital. And in Louise Hay's book, they say that meningitis is like extreme self-hatred. So I kind of reached that like crux and that kind of a deep point. And then, God, I'm so thankful I launched. It's like all the sprung load tension from that sort of childhood and growing up. Once I was 18, I discovered rock climbing, and I discovered at that time jam music, which exploded me. I was obsessed. I was in the mountains every single day, running around barefoot, climbing anything and everything that I could. I was playing music with all sorts of dynamic musicians and exponentiating my skill at the keyboards. Found my love for hand percussion around the same time. Started learning the beginnings of beatboxing and things like that. But I really just found this really profound accelerated path. And that led me to some, I threw myself into a rites of passage journey in South America when I was 20 years old. I got kidnapped in Patagonia, had to escape, steal horses, and get away in the middle of the night. Got lost in the Patagonian wilderness with no food or water. Eventually made it out of that, then went up to where the tallest mountain outside of the Himalayas is, and I rented a bunch of the cheapest gear I could find and ended up becoming the youngest person to ever solo the tallest mountain outside of the Himalayas. And then came back from that and joined a traveling circus troupe with a slackline and a djembe. And I was playing my djembe, getting on the slackline, making tips, hitchhiking slowly north through the Andes. And it was just this big journey in my earliest formative 20s, rite of passage. And came back from that, finished my degree in conservation ecology and working as an ecologist, but then slipped right into helping to build sustainable communities, teaching slackline and acro yoga, and actually traveling around the world, helping set up yoga festivals and bringing the somatic playground, the super creative side to the yoga world in that regard, bringing the flow arts and the slack lines and the acro and things like that. And so that carried me for quite a while until I finally, built a beautiful career there, and then realized that I didn't want to travel anymore, that the mountains in North Carolina were strongly calling me back, and that, I had conquered all these fears. I had conquered a lot of my ancient, by that point, feeling self-worth issues. But what I needed next was to be rooted in one place, to basically allow that flow state that I was so easily, I could just flow wherever I wanted to go, and find kind of the juice and the magic in the moments. Like one of the best gifts, actually. I needed to anchor myself in one place, and I needed to put the roots down so that I could bring those flows to me and become sort of the confluence of a lot of movement and a lot of energy in the world. And that's where Mandala Chocolate and Mandala Springs came into existence.
Wow, beautiful. That's amazing. What an epic life journey and story. And one of the things that I find particularly, I have this humorous experience in our friendship because you tell a story like that and it's so unique and it's so unusual, and somehow there's like all these different points of similarity I can relate to. Grew up rock climbing, crazy experiences in South America and as a teenager, all these things. And I guess I might as well tell the story right now. You already heard this before we started recording, but just because I think it's pretty hilarious. I was getting ready for this episode and I was contemplating in my mind the topics we'll go over and just reflecting on how many unusual areas of overlap we have in this fascinating way. Like, we're both Leos, we're both doing, a number of different projects. We're kind of polymaths in that way. And those projects all have these similarities, the land-based center or founding festivals, et cetera. And I was thinking, we have all these fascinating parallels, but I bet he won't wear a white collared shirt today. I had this random thought just popped into my head. I have no idea where it came from. I literally thought that to myself before I got on the call, and here we are in the same shirt. So I think it's hilarious. It's fascinating what these synchronicities and like soul connections really mean. I don't know, but it's very, very interesting. So thank you for sharing a little bit about your journey, the breakthroughs that you had early on, and the full circle kind of return to roots. I don't know if you mentioned, I think you did some cloud forest conservation as well. I don't know if you went into any of those details or if you want to mention that.
What's amazing is the overview that I just gave you. I'm writing a book, and it's a big book about everything that's contained in there. And so I think it's the sign of a life well lived, and grabbing the opportunity of being in a body in the 3D world, living a life, that, there's more content, there's more beautiful stories than can be encompassed in any given conversation. And so just before Mandala Springs, like while I was doing the acro yoga and slackline yoga, I was still working as a conservation ecologist, still very much in love with the Southern Appalachian ecosystem, which, I spent so many years of my life running around barefoot. And that's where I really started to become really aware of the value of cloud forest ecosystems. And a cloud forest is a mountain rainforest, either in the tropics or in the temperate area, where you have a lot of epiphytic growth, or the plant life that lives on the rocks and the trees, and it combs all the moisture out of the atmosphere and creates its own weather patterns and its own capacity to recharge the watershed without the need for other sources of moisture. And when you're in places like Guatemala, for example, where I worked extensively, um, you have a small cloud forest on top of a mountain that is providing the weather systems and the water generating pattern for 300 like square kilometers around it. And you'll see all over South America, and sadly all over the world, where the cloud forest, because there's a lot of valuable tree species that grow in that, a lot of these like tropical versions of the deciduous tree species that we have like here in Southern Appalachia, like big oaks and mahoganies and walnut species, different things like that. They'll cut down these cloud forests, and then the entire area around it becomes a desert. So acre per acre, cloud forest is the most valuable kind of forest that we have. So me and my buddy Jeremy Shavy, who I've done a lot of ecology work with and stream restoration projects and stuff like that over the years, we got a message from a mutual friend, Phil, who was like, he had been mapping to try to find a bird that was thought to be extinct called the horned guan. And he had done GIS mapping, super nerdy style, figuring out all of the things that make a cloud forest exist. And he was looking at the spread and then looking at overhead pictures, and he saw this dark patch up in the central northern highlands of Guatemala. He's like, well, what's this? Tried to do some research, couldn't find a single name, any record of it being studied by the Western world or anything. So he went there. He met the Quiche Mayan people who live right on the periphery of it. And he started like exploring this place. And he's like, this is an untouched gem. It is unknown to the Western world. And he called me and Jeremy because we're both just ready, adventure ready. It's big cave systems, huge trees. And I've got lots of rope skill for getting into dynamic places. So he called us in, and we went to this cloud forest. And Yash, I cannot begin to describe to you this place. Untouched, ancient wilderness, more quetzals than I've ever seen in any one place. The horned guan was there, so that bird was found. Brand new plant species, animals, like terrestrial crab species. We even found in our first trip there a plant that didn't belong to any known family. So,
Wow.
like massive cave systems that go on forever, and new waterfalls, everything, just an absolute dream. And so we fell in love with it. It's like, man, let's support these local Quiche people. Let's bring a retreat down and bring people into the cloud forest, take them into the caves, set up ropes to get up into the canopy of the trees, and just have this exploratory adventure. So the first season we did that, we came in and discovered an atrocity, basically led by a local mayor of the closest local actual town. He was bringing in these Spanish furniture making investors and looking at basically buying from the local tribe this entire forest so that they could level it and put cattle there and get all the money for the furniture. And they had built a 1 kilometer monstrosity of a road into it. and they had cut, I mean, it's very, very steep land. They had cut this road. It was massive destruction. It was horrifying. And luckily, the machine had died. They would have kept going. So we took the group on the retreat. We had a beautiful time in the heart of the forest, came back, and somebody with machetes and chainsaws had started cutting down more trees in the path that the machine would eventually go. And we had just been with the spirit of this powerful land, this massive forest, this, like, you could feel the life force of this thing. The whole group was silent in tears, feeling the rage of the whole thing. And as I was walking out of there, I felt a really, like, a wave of energy come over me, strong, like a massive warm flush. And we're walking out up at the top of the hill. I turn around and I'm looking at the whole forest. I've got my trekking pole in my hand, and I feel just sort of the ancient power that I think is really inherent to all people, but it's something that sadly most people in our world don't cultivate as much. And I took that, and that became my staff, and I punched it into the ground. I called the four directions, and I'm like, I could feel something come into me. It wasn't me saying, Forrest, I'm going to save you. It was an agreement between me and the forest that the forest is saved. I could feel it settle into my bones, like this, just this deep understanding. In that same moment, uh, a hummingbird comes and starts flying and hovering right at my ear. It starts raining, and two mating pairs of quetzals dance across the sky in front of me. Um, and that was it. And after letting that settle for a moment, I turned around and walked away. And then basically, it was probably 6 months later that I found out that they had cut another little piece, and something snapped in me. I was crying. I turned my camera on myself and asked for help, and then made a post instead because I was a little sheepish about it. Two friends came over and said, "Nah, man, you need to post that video right now." I set up a GoFundMe for $1,500, and 3 months later, went down with 70 grand and bought 333 acres of it outright with a nonprofit. And within a year, raised $1.2 million and protected all of the threatened forest. And to date, the project has raised over $14 million. And that cloud forest and the communities that depend on it are protected forever.
Wow, that's truly incredible. The stuff of legends, and it's just one little corner we decided to touch on in the overall story so far. It gave me shivers. So thank you for doing that and for sharing that and fulfilling the role that you were asked to
It's
fulfill.
really my pleasure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
One of the coolest things I've ever gotten to be a part of.
yeah. Yeah, that's an incredible story. I want to make sure that we get to some of the heart and soul of these topics. I really want to make sure we dive into Mandala Springs. You mentioned starting yoga festivals and so many other topics that we'll touch upon. But something that perked up my ears as a yet again fellow beatboxer and an MC. You said you beatbox. I don't know what it would do to the audio levels, but as a little interlude, I don't know if you want to demonstrate your skills there for a moment. It would be kind of fun for the listeners to hear a quick Robbie original beatbox free flow.
Let's see how it goes.
Hey, yo, we should do a whole episode where we're just speaking like that the whole time. See what
Yes,
happens.
please.
So you and I met in Lebanon. This was a journey that our brother Mon organized. Mon is another brother that came into my life in a hilariously synchronistic manner that we have 40 acres here near Colorado Springs, the Eco Village, and we organize festivals all over the country. And we were coming up on one of our larger festivals here on our land for the first time. And it was last minute. We didn't have enough food vendors. And we're here in Colorado. I just figured something will happen. I was very busy, didn't find a food vendor yet. And out of nowhere, Mon calls me from North Carolina, of all places, and says, I see you have a festival coming up on your land there. Maybe I'll drive from North Carolina and serve food if you need that. I was like, that's the one thing we need. It's so random, not random, hilarious. Another amazing example of the universe conspiring in our favor. So, anyways, that's how I met Mon. He served amazing food at the event and then invited me to come to Lebanon with you guys. It was probably almost 2 years ago now.
Wow.
And yeah, it was quite a journey. And we were there both as team members on this beautiful retreat. And while there, I learned a lot more about your work, and especially about Mandala Springs, which I'd like to learn a lot more about today and introduce to our audience. My understanding is Mandala Springs is essentially this beautiful land-based community center that you're cultivating in Asheville, North Carolina, and that you're also, I see you as kind of like a staple and one of the pillars of the new paradigm culture and movement happening in Asheville, which I hope to come visit, and maybe we can plant a seed for some sort of collaboration
Yeah.
there a little later on. But yeah, just want to hear the full introduction to Mandala Springs, the story of it, what it's all about, and if you can describe that project for us.
Yeah, and I'll try to utilize a little bit more brevity in my storytelling. It's easy to get carried away in them, but basically, Mandala Springs is the culmination of a lifelong dream. It's funny. I have writings from when I was 12 years old where you can see the basic idea. It's like I want to create a place that's like heaven on earth, where people are working together and connecting to the land and things like that. Like you can see like 12-year-old Robbie having these ideas. And even over time, as I was doing all the other things, you see in my writings, I have journals that I've been keeping for my entire life, and the ideas were getting more and more refined, more and more refined. It's like, well, I don't just want land for people. I want to make sure that it's got abundant spring water, and I want to make sure that it has really abundant and diverse forests, and I want it to have its own bouldery stream, because I've always considered where stone and water meet to be the greatest teacher in my life. Like wherever I am on the planet, where mountain streams carve stone is a particularly home feeling place for me, and where I learned to move my body and learned a lot about how to orient myself into the world. So I wanted that too. I wanted all of it within 30 minutes of Asheville, and on top of that, I wanted high speed internet. And so, so I got 25 minutes from Asheville, national forest on three sides, 67 acres, one of the most abundant ecosystems on Earth. In fact, the most biodiverse place in the entire subtropical or temperate world. 47 perennial springs that are a gallon a minute or more on the property. A big, gorgeous creek with boulders and waterfalls and swimming holes running right through the center. And two different fiber services to choose from running up to the top of the cove. Like, can't make this stuff up. So, this land, when I lived in Asheville, I would work on my books, work on writing and different things. I discovered that this road that I live on, Stony Fork, was the closest place I could get to from downtown Asheville that had the most bold, beautiful, and abundant nature. And so I would drive up this road like sometimes 3 days a week, set up a crash pad, like a bouldering crash pad, a little motorcycle battery in my computer, and do some work with my feet in the water, and then go home. And so I would pass this property. And, back then, Stony Fork had a little bit of a reputation. Like once you get up to the gravel, you don't make eye contact with anyone. You just keep going, because this piece of property especially sort of drove that, because it had been abandoned for like 20 years. It had all this stuff, like an old barn, an old mill, another old structure, all sorts of industrial stuff, and it had been overgrown and been sitting for a couple decades. Like there were people that grew up with this land being the place you go to do whatever you wanted to do, because it was known absentee ownership. It was known to be a spot that was a free for all. I had a weird experience one day when I was driving up. I was like, I'm going to stop there was only a little pull off before it was all overgrown with blackberry brambles. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to walk onto this sketchy piece of land where the reputation is like not to stop. Very weird for me. Like, you know, as much as I will venture into the wild wilderness, I don't in Southern Appalachia, you don't just stop and get out and start walking on a piece of private property. But I did. I just felt pulled and called. And I'm walking on the little tiny foot trail between the blackberry brambles, and all of a sudden I hear a noise coming out in front of me. I'm like, oh crap, what's gonna happen here? And a little deer steps out. It's like a little baby deer, and it just looks at me with these big doe eyes. And I just stare at the deer, and it stares at me, and then it ducks its head and it takes one little furtive step towards me. And that was like I got shivers down my spine. It then like perked its ears, heard something, turned around, and slowly walked back into the brambles. And that was 3 years before I was even starting to look for land. And so I went on a big land hunt, looked at all these properties. I was going to buy a little piece by myself, put my tiny house on it, or buy a little piece of a bigger piece with other people. And I kept getting closer and closer of like, oh, this is a place that could work, to a place where I was like, the last place I looked at before this was like, I could really make this work. And then a friend reminded me that there was this piece of property up on Stony Fork that I had forgotten all about. And so I hunted down the woman who owned it, got permission to come onto the property, and then there was the difference. And this is a really important distinction for people in life. Like, if you're always accepting, like, oh, I can make this work, this has all the things, I can make it work, then you're probably missing the this is it moments in life. Because we really don't need to compromise. There is a moment where you know this place was like spoke to me directly. This is it. But then when I signed the papers on it, then all of a sudden that big old junkyard was my junkyard, and I had to deal with it. And so I spent years just focusing on cleaning up everything that didn't belong. Moved my tiny house to it. Eventually built the chocolate factory, vent space, my home, yurts, and other structures. And every season and every year, it's a process of maturation. Got it certified organic as a forest farm for my chocolate company, because I use wild perennial species. I do wild perennial forest farming that I use in the chocolate. And every year it just gets better and better. And this season is already, we've just begun, and it's already the best we've ever had, despite the fact that our whole community just got so completely devastated by Hurricane Helene.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that's a good segue. We'll keep weaving through the various kind of focal points here, but I think it's really important that we dive into this topic of Hurricane Helene. I see that you've been really living into doing a lot of work to help with hurricane relief. And I think that this is a really important topic. The disasters that are happening around, something that people probably need and want to learn more and hear about and understand what's going on. What was that like? What happened? So the whole story of the hurricane itself, and then especially the work you're doing, how people can help or get involved, and the story of what you've done with the tiny homes and housing support, all of those details. If you want to just go into that side of things for now, we can go down that road for a moment, which I think is a particularly important one to explore in this episode.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. I think I sort of saw that this storm was going to be potentially bigger and more devastating. It seemed like it was going to go kind of to the west of us. So none of us, none of us were really prepared for the fact that we were already in a flood state from another storm that was happening before the hurricane rode the train track of that low pressure system right up into the mountains. So none of us really had a full idea of how big it was going to be. But one thing to note, my fiance, I was able to actually get her out. She had to do a presentation in Pennsylvania on like one of the very last planes that left. And that's an important fact in this because she was gone. I had a whole crew here on land and things started to get crazy all overnight. Thursday night, Friday is when it started to peak during the day. So I'm watching this creek get well beyond any flood level that I'd ever seen before. Watch my neighbor. I only have a few neighbors upstream of me on this one side of the property, and I watched my neighbor's house get picked up, turned 90 degrees, and then crushed and like thrown downstream, and it took out all these trees in the process.
Wow.
Literal house-sized boulders like were being pushed, moved, and tumbled. You could feel the concussion of landslides and boulders moving down the raging torrent of this creek in the land. Like the land was shaking with the movement of Earth. It's a 30,000 year geologic scale event. The Earth moved in this. And at that moment when it was peaking is when I started to get really scared because the water was starting to reach my highest structures or my lowest structures closest to the stream, which I had always thought were well beyond any capacity to be affected by any level of flood, I guess, except for 30,000 year level event. And what's a really cool thing to note is that our sweat lodge is on the upstream part. We have a table that we would keep our sweat lodge blankets on. The table got knocked over into the sweat lodge, and then sticks started to pile up. Those sticks redirected the water, led to bigger trees getting piled up into that same spot, and sent the greater part of the flow to the other side of the creek away from our structures. So if you get on the other side of the creek and you look over to the sweat lodge, you can see right before the sweat lodge, the entire bank is just completely gone. Like it's completely undercut. And then you see where the sweat lodge created this block and the sweat lodge stands. It started slowly enough that the lodge and the lodge pit are still intact. That that it redirected the water to the other side. And while the bank got destroyed on that side, it did not get undercut, and it saved all of the structures downstream of it. Absolutely incredible.
That's incredible. So your sweat lodge saved Mandala Springs.
Yeah, it saved a lot of our infrastructure. Very, very grateful for that, and a really profound like moment. So basically, you had this storm. Afternoon it started to dissipate, and then the next thing we know, we are literally stuck. Like the water's still high. Landslides have happened everywhere. We didn't know it at the time, but 20 different places where the road just cut off, and the creek had decided to go where the road had been. And we had no food, water, power, or we had food, we had spring water, but we had no power, no way to communicate with anyone. So the first few days, I had a whole crew of people that were at Mandala Springs. It was really keeping everyone keeping everyone really working as a team. So the most important job immediately was, digging ourselves out, uh, making sure that our neighbors were safe, making sure that people that needed medication had it, uh, and really just orienting ourselves to the situation. And my job was to keep my whole team. I had a whole crew of people that lived at Mandala and people who just happened to be at Mandala for the storm became my wards. And I needed to keep them in good spirits, keep them occupied with action. And a few days into it, when we finally were able to get out, we had to cross all of these brand new canyons where the road used to be, um, and just that first trip out was indescribable. All of these homes, every single structure that was anywhere in the floodplain, the new floodplain, the floodplain beyond what we ever expected to be the floodplain, was destroyed. Cars wrapped around trees, debris, 20 feet up in the trees, uh, just devastated. Boulders and rocks and trees strewn everywhere. So it was truly walking through an apocalyptic environment, and would meet with other people along the way who were venturing out and finally getting the capacity to leave and getting updates from people. Really proud to say that a lot of people had the same idea, had lists of names of everyone in their little zone, making sure they were safe, lists of who needed insulin and other medications, list of people who were not safe and needed immediate emergency assistance, um, and things like that. And when we finally got to the hub where the disaster relief hub for our area was being created, I was able to make a phone call. They had created a temporary Wi-Fi service there, and I called my fiance Eleanor, and she just burst into tears. What I didn't realize is the moment the storm hit, she was gone, and all of a sudden she has no idea. Her father is with me here. I'm here. She doesn't know if we got taken out by water or a landslide or what's going on. So what she had started doing immediately was organizing people into supply chains, getting donations, getting things moving into our area. And so before I ever even had an opportunity to communicate with a single person, Eleanor was already starting to spearhead the relief effort, which was really amazing. She's an organizational genius, and she's just really, really adept at these things. So over time, it was getting the capacity to at least get four-wheelers in and out. And, I had my little tractor on my end. Luckily, everywhere down the line, people had their tractors or excavators or skid steers, and everyone was working around the clock. I was hauling diesel like this, 60 pounds in each hand, CrossFit style, like for miles and miles and miles, just back and forth. And it was like that only way we could get it around, because you couldn't get four-wheelers in or out, but you got to keep these machines running. So everybody was really working together. The Relief Hub was one of the most inspiring things I've ever seen. In short order, you have all of the community members organize themselves into a medical team, into relief, supply, organization, distribution, all the different areas you would need in a disaster relief response had well organized leadership and execution. And the reason this is so astounding is there was a guy who worked for FEMA for 35 years. His job, he would go to every disaster site around the world. And what he would do is, where there's an emergent relief hub, because they just emerge where they can in the midst of a disaster, everybody's nervous systems are so fried and they're in such a trauma response that most of the time they can't get past fighting with each other to actually meaningfully enact a disaster relief response. So his job is to go to each site and organize them and say, you're the lead of this thing. You're the lead of this thing. Here's who, chains of command. He'd establish structure so they could actually get to the disaster relief. He got to Barnardsville and he looked around and he spent most of the day there quiet taking notes. And then he told everybody, he's like, listen, I've been doing this for 35 years. I have never in my life seen a disaster relief organization organize themselves this well. You all are in a different paradigm. And the key here is you have basically what were two separate communities. You had the primitive skills, back to the earth, homesteading, community oriented people who have been buying land over the last 15, 20 years and moving in here. You've got the local community that's been here their whole lives. And for a long time, these communities have been sort of in their own bubbles, functioning generally separate from each other. All of a sudden, all of these homesteading, primitive skills, knowing how to create events and festivals and all these things, people have all these skills in organization and running these things, and they know all of these skills. The local community, they know how to fix your diesel engine. They know how to run these machines masterfully to reestablish roads where canyons exist, to be able to efficiently create pathways around these places for side-by-sides and four-wheelers to be able to get through. And everyone came together and became one community and worked together. And so that was the beginning. And all of our relief efforts began with no time from that moment. Literally the day that our last little cove got this crazy wild up and down four-wheel access to be able to get a four-wheeler out, we were already delivering spring water. We were given 100-gallon bottles and we began to deliver spring water the same day. So the moment that we even had access to the outside world, Mandala Springs relief effort began, and it grew from there.
Wow. I mean, these stories, it's truly incredible, and so important for us as global citizens to be hearing these stories and understanding what happened, understanding the ways that we can respond to disasters like this. I think it's kind of interesting. I said something like, "Oh, staple in the new paradigm culture," kind of. Lightly in passing when I was introducing you and your center, but then what you're describing is, and you called it, it's a different paradigm. You're describing how can we actually, build, even when it has to happen from the ground up, ways of functioning harmoniously with each other and with our surroundings. And I think that's something people are seeing is more and more, is that the systems we've set up in our dominant civilization are fragile. Some aspects of it may be expiring. And what does it look like to have a fresh start? And what are the most, practical, basic, ancient components of what we need to know to make that work and function? And you're describing a lot of it in such a visceral way. So I want to get more into that. But before we do, why don't you share with us, where is the Mandala Springs relief effort at now? Kind of describe the work you've been doing since this more post-apocalyptic survival experience that you were able to transmute into being of service pretty quickly yourself. So thank you again for that. And why don't you share with us what you've been doing since and what you're doing now and how that's all working?
So the water project expanded. We went from me on a side-by-side delivering 100 literal gallons of water to neighbors, to once we had roads reestablished, when they were still just dirt paths that a vehicle could get up and down, we started getting trucks with trailers coming with big 330-gallon IBC totes, and we got transfer pumps, and we were pumping these we had tanks on site. We were pumping and filling up these trailers and sending them to distribution centers all around town because no one had water. That was one of the biggest issues. The entire water network for Asheville area was gone. So we have some of the best water in the world, and it kept flowing. So we kept doing that. Eventually, we got a 2,500 gallon water truck. We started filling that. We had over 420 distribution sites around the area. We created GIS maps and had an advanced distribution strategy. So other people who were able to provide water, we were all working together to make sure that we were being efficient with our deliveries. And we were able to provide thousands and thousands of gallons of water a day to people. Simultaneously, we set up a volunteer hub. So people coming from all over the country, all over the world, actually, we set up our event space in our chocolate craftery in the upstairs. We made it into a dormitory. We had all sorts of mattresses, made it really fun and cool. We set up a kitchen. We had 3 meals a day being provided. And we basically created a hub where all of the volunteers who were coming to help rebuild, like dig people out, do all the work that was needed, had a place to stay, had a place to eat, had a place to be together and connect. And then that led to us understanding that very quickly a lot of people lost their homes. A lot of people lost their homes, like a devastating number. And that eventually everyone got water and food was coming in, trucks, basic medical supplies were there. The triage had stabilized where people were safe as far as their basic physical needs, except for shelter. You have people who lost their home. There is no flood insurance. They're not getting a dime for their loss, and they're now living in tents. And it's quickly approaching winter. This winter having been, now that we're coming out of it, one of the coldest we've had in history. One of the most consistently brutally cold winters. We had people dying in tents in these little clusters of basically tent villages that were set up for people who lost their homes. So creating homes became one of the most important things. So we have been working vigilantly, like pretty much nonstop, to create space for tiny homes and RVs that have been allocated to families that have lost their spaces, to have a grounded, rent-free space that they can pick their lives back up and get themselves together, be safe, and be able to regenerate from.
Wow. So is that still currently a pretty active project you're in the middle of right now?
It's such an active project that I had to pause away from this podcast to go pay the guy that we just had moving some of these shed style tiny houses into their permanent homes, because we have 3 different tiny houses with people moving into them this week. So
Mm-hmm.
it is a full-time job. We have a nonprofit that we are utilizing. It requires a lot of resources. We have a lot of work to do. We need to raise money, get grants, or whatever it is to be able to keep this project going for long term, because that's what is needed right now.
So, in case it's something that the listeners are still able to help out with when this episode comes back or comes out, is there a way that people can help out or contribute, get involved that you can mention for us?
Absolutely. If you go to mandalasprings.com, you can get lots of links to all of our existing relief efforts that also give you links to how you can donate, how you can fill out forms. If you have skills, you're like, I'm a grant writer, I can get you guys grants. I want to come and volunteer. I want to help in this way or that. You can fill out a form, and we have a pretty organized system here to receive whatever support is able to come. And it's all, it's received with a lot of gratitude because we're doing the best we can to help as many people as we can with this.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's so wild. Definitely put these things put into perspective that, what it means when we say water is life. You were just describing water being life and people's lives depending on someone like yourselves being able to bring them water from a place like Mandala Springs. So it's beautiful that you were able to do that. And is the chocolate still active? You still got the chocolate going?
Yeah, luckily the chocolate craftery here on site was undamaged. We definitely had landslides and a lot of tree loss, and so some of the habitat and some of the wild perennial native species that I was farming in the forest, some of that got destroyed. But the chocolate is still being made. It took a pretty large hit because a lot of the businesses that we sold chocolate to no longer exist, and there was months that we couldn't produce chocolate either. So we're still recovering from that. But Mandala Chocolate is a gift, and it's the only chocolate company out there that's providing this quality of superfood chocolate, sugar-free chocolates using wild crafted and wild simulated herbs and mushrooms, doing the 72-hour stone grind to make sure that we're maximizing bioavailability and nutrient absorption capacity. And it's an amazing product. And, you know, it's something that I plan on doing and having out there for the long haul.
Yeah, I think Mon actually brought us some way back when he actually came to serve food at the festival here, and I remember that being delicious. So, from the first bite back in the day, we also have a lot of different mutual contacts. I think Amani had been looking to get involved out there, of Amani of Liquid Bloom, because he lives here in Colorado. At your place, but I guess maybe now looking at Peru. But I know that Yona still, because it's amazing that the lodge saved the infrastructure there and stayed standing. Are y'all still working with Yona, the Cherokee elder that was with
Yeah, I
us?
just had dinner with Yona a couple days ago, and he's doing well. He lost his house
Wow.
in the storm, so he's been in recovery with all of this. Actually, just sent him a text message today about a retreat, doing a rites of passage retreat called the Reconvergence
Mm-hmm.
here in June, at the end of June, and having Yona do a sweat lodge is a big part of what we've done in the past. So I just sent him a message to see if we can get Yona in there for the sweat lodge for that retreat. And you talk about Amani. Amani is working with Mandala Springs. Me, Amani, and another friend from South Africa, Warwick, went together and bought a 20-acre piece adjacent to Mandala Springs that we call Mandala Ridge. So
Mm-hmm.
it's an interconnected piece of land that is part of the greater project that we are still incubating the way that we want to integrate and eventually develop it into a part of this bigger vision of a sustainable, regenerative, healthy future where people and the land are working coherently with each other.
Amazing. Yeah, well, I do, I guess, want to reiterate. I think it would be amazing to start collaborating a little bit more. I'd like to come out there, and so just want to fully plant and water that seed that I planted earlier in the conversation now, and say that. And I know we've been in touch about it a little bit. We both are very busy, but I think it would be great to come visit, maybe facilitate some sort of retreat there, and then perhaps even start to create some bridging between our centers, which we have our land-based center here in Colorado and so on.
I know you've. I mean, it's the parallels are stunning. You're a man after my own heart, and vision and action, all. And I'm really grateful to those that put themselves at the tip of the spear, so to speak, and have the trial by fire as we learn how to do something that hasn't been done in recent history. You know, we're learning how to create the kind of world that we want to pass on to generations to come. And I think that not only do I want to collaborate more, I think that it's actually important and almost even like our responsibility to collaborate more and to connect these like-hearted projects and find the ways that we can be of mutual support to each other, because what we're doing is prodigious and it's hard and it's beautiful and it requires a lot of support. So I'm looking forward to having you out here, looking forward to hosting you, doing some things out here. Maybe I can come out there and host some things there, and we can continue to weave these projects together in meaningful ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we're on the same page about it. I feel the same way. And it's part of why we're creating this podcast as well, to really weave a tapestry and really create this kind of mycelial network of global intelligence that's moving through all these different people, all these different modalities and projects to bring in a new way. And so, yeah, that's a big part of the vision of it. And maybe that's a good segue into some of your other work, because I know that you're involved with things related to sound, to music, to facilitating practices, primal movement. And I think we'll start there. I see that you're also have this growing online presence, I noticed. So we'll get to that. But I think let's start with a direct segue from everything that you just shared with us, the incredible work you're doing at Mandala Springs with the hurricane relief, housing, the connection to nature there. And how does that relate to two different avenues of what I know and have heard about your relationship to nature? And I think we'll start more briefly with the one about, you told me in Lebanon on a walk through the ancient forest there that you record nature sounds that people use in their music, DJs, etc. So do you want to share a little bit about that and about your music in general? And then
Yeah.
just like the creative channel, and then we'll get to the practices.
Yes. Oh, so excited to talk about music. Music is at the core of my being. Been playing piano since I was 5, keyboards and drums and music producing basically my whole life. I love it so much. But I'm also a nature spirit. So it's this dual life where it's like, you know, music production, studios, and computers, and crawling on all fours barefoot through the rhododendron. So me and my buddy Anthony Thogmartin from Papadosio.
He's played our event. He played Heartfire Festival at Naropa University in 2020, which was a big one. But anyways, yeah.
The amount of synergy is just,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah.
This is amazing. But it's like, so Anthony's one of my best friends in the world. He just had a baby this week, by the way.
Woo!
Very excited for him. And so years ago, we decided that we wanted to make a sample pack of nature sounds, not just the ambient sounds that nature's making, but to go in and do stuff with nature. So, like, go to a place where there's springs making a bunch of mud and squish the mud in different ways with my feet, or take a bunch of pebbles and throw them off this cliff and the sound of them clunking and clattering, taking a small tree and swishing it around and like getting that swishy noise and all sorts of stuff. And generally what we would do is Anthony would have our portable recording device and he'd figure out where the best reflection would be for the sound. And then I would do something or a bunch of different things. And we would just record all this stuff. Then we would go back to his studio and we'd listen to all these things. And we'd pick out the sound clips that we liked. We'd clean them up, make sure they zeroed. And then we'd be like, so we had to make categories for these things. It's like, so we created things like thuds, thunks, squishies, like splashies, like crunches, scatters, things like that. And so the arguments were hilarious. It's like, man, that I feel like that's a crunch. It's like it's more of a scatter, man. That's more of a scatter. Like it's like, is that a drip or is that a splash? And so we put together this whole like sample pack called the Forest Collection and put it out there. And Anthony offers it to all of his students with his Seed to Stage Ableton School, which is amazing, by the way. If you ever want to learn Ableton live, he's the master. His school is amazing. And we've been selling it, and it's just what happens is all this music comes out, like from all of these well-known producers, and I'll hear myself throwing pebbles off of a cliff or like squishing my foot in the mud or stuff like that in all of this electronic music that's out there in the world. And it tickles me every time I hear a Forest Collection sample. It's just such a wonderful thing. And I think it's like for every time that I actually recognize one, how many times am I hearing it and not even knowing? So it's a really fun synergy for me of my love of nature, my love of introducing people to getting enthusiastic about the natural world, building their own fluency and their own intimacy and connection with it, and my love of making music. So yeah, it's really fun.
Do you want to speak just for a moment while we're on this to your own music and music process, projects, experience outside of the sample pack?
Sure. Yeah, I've been writing music for a long time, and similar to you, the Renaissance man, the polymath sort of reality of my life, um, it shows up in my music. I love exploring wide ranges of different genres, um, and I've been writing hundreds and hundreds of songs, spending thousands of hours producing them. But I was actually blocked for a long time in releasing anything because my perfectionist mind never ever felt like anything was ready. I realized that that was a growth edge, and I began releasing more and more music. I've released a track recently with the Great Medicine Show and Activation. That's really fun, and it just features me playing all these crazy tribal instruments, like making tribal noises with my mouth and having a lot of fun in the process. I started releasing anthology albums of all this backlog of music that I put so much love into but never released. So now I'm putting out these little anthology albums, and I've got some really fun musical projects along the way. So I've basically figured out that I needed to create. I've got my Rob Lenfestey. I'm going to turn it into Robbie because I like that better. But it's Rob Lenfestey right now on Spotify and all those things, and Amorphous on Spotify and things like that. And basically, all of my wild, fun, cinematic, creative, playful, everything is going to go under my name. And Amorphous is specifically for my EDM danceable music. And so I've created this little bit of differentiation. But what's most exciting of all is I have built out my music coaching now and my music production business. I'm starting to take on clients, and I'm starting to produce people's music because it's something that's a real joy for me. It's like when somebody gives me a vision of what they want, I can create a song in real time very quickly. It's arguably one of the greatest gifts I've been given. And so it's one that I've been cultivating my whole life, and now I'm starting to share it. So I've got a few clients I'm working with right now making albums for them, and we're having a tremendous amount of fun. And I've got a few clients now that I am working with in helping them just break the shell on their creative process so they can start accessing their like creative vitality and start making their own music. And that can lead into then supporting them in actually like building an album from a place of not even knowing if they had musicality in them to begin with. And so opening that up for another human being is one of the most beautiful things I can imagine. Like introducing someone to their music or or taking their vision and being able to turn it into a studio quality recording that they can share with the world is exquisite and exciting and beautiful. And so as Mandala Springs stabilizes and Mandala Chocolate stabilizes, I'm putting a lot more energy there currently.
Awesome. Yeah, I love to hear it. And I'm sure we'll explore that more together as well. I want to do a little do-si-do here with the last few topics to touch on before we wrap up. And one of those I mentioned is the movement practices, the breath work, the other psychosomatic practices that you facilitate. And I know that we actually both facilitated some practices, I think one after the other in
That's right.
Lebanon. And I know that there's this whole influence, just as you've described in your everything you're doing, whether it's your work at Mandala Springs, all the way back to the cloud forest in Guatemala, and conserving that. It's like all connected, even the rock climbing, to nature, right? To our primordial nature, to our relationship with the wilderness, with these primal aspects of existence is how I have perceived it from you. And so I'd love, and I think you even told me a story once of being on the mountainside somewhere and having an encounter. Maybe it was with a mountain lion. I'm sure there's many different moments like this, but that was a wild one to hear. So I don't know if you want to share a little bit about primal movement. I remember when you facilitated a practice, it involved how do we walk, how do we gaze, and I'm sure all the senses, how we breathe, how we listen, it's all connected, how we interact with the cold, right, which is a big part of Wim Hof breath work and some of these other, which I think you're a Wim Hof facilitator in particular as part
I'm
of
one
what
of
you
the
do.
first
Yeah.
ever certified Wim Hof method instructors in the US. I
Wow.
spent months of my life training with Wim directly, and yeah, was asked to become one of the first instructors and facilitators in the Wim
Incredible.
Hof method.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So go ahead, and I will again leave it a little open ended. Just pick up whichever thread you want to run with, whether it's the movement, the mountain lion, or the Wim Hof. Just
Let's
soak us
go.
in some knowledge about the way we move and relate to our surroundings and breathe and so on.
Well, I've always had this love of movement and exploring the human body, of the natural world, exploring not how to gain fluency in the language of the living world, which might sound esoteric, but it's actually a very practical skill that Western human beings have only been without for a short order of a few generations. Most primitive peoples on the planet wouldn't even consider that you could lack fluency in your native environment and not get clear messages from the plants and the ecosystem and all sorts of different things. So that's something that I've taken a lot of passion in, really introducing people. And to gain fluency in the natural world, you have to also gain fluency in your own internal world. As within, so without. You can learn little bits of each in isolation, but it's really as a whole. So it's connecting to the way that we move our bodies in a natural way, like where the way that we do our natural gait. Most people's entire gait, like the way that they walk, is this wildly out of alignment thing that we learned through walking with shoes on hard, flat surfaces. Um, and that changes the entire structure of the body, and it changes it puts unnecessary stress over time on all of our joints. It's why people's knees fail and their backs fail over time, and they lose the flexibility and mobility in their spine and their joints, is because the the joints and everything in the body has had to try and compensate for this fundamentally out of alignment like way that people move. And so when people ask me, well, where did you originally learn all of this? And I eventually, the answer was where stone and water meet. The places where stone and water meet, I would crawl head first on all fours. I would move in different ways. press myself between two stones and chimney up, or crawling headfirst down them. But ultimately, like, learning to dance with the natural world, with my body. And this is before even learning anything about the native ecology and the plant communities, and starting to understand them as communities and the way that they organize themselves, and the sublime intelligence that the natural world organizes itself with. All of these things converge into a coherent state that I believe creates what we call the polymath or the Renaissance capacity. It awakens that primal, expansive intelligence in the human being. It actually gives us access to what I believe is latently there for just about, if not every person on the planet. The biggest difference is how much of our life is spent learning new patterns, learning them in ways that contributes to flow state, fluidity, like keeping things moving and fluid and lubricated and healthy, fluidity in our thought process, and how many things are creating more and more rigidity and more calcification of habit and behavior based on what has become our habitual comfort zone. And I think that there's like little micro actions every single day that either lead towards an expanded genius that is capable of seeing so much from a much wider periphery of what's actually available in this world, or slowly narrows the field of our focus into a smaller and smaller field of what we believe to be the entire encompassing world around us, what we believe to actually be our capacity, what's possible. And I think that the world isn't inherently what we would typify from the Western scientific world. It is a magical place. There's a lot going on. And it's my earnest prayer, desire, and actionable like goal to help more and more people to connect with a greater and greater amount of their capacity to expand the realm of what they're able to perceive, what they're able to receive from the world, and the freedom they have in creating, exploring, innovating, and really acting their power into existence.
Beautiful. Well, let's celebrate that and make it happen. You mentioned, a few different things I want to touch on. So one is you mentioned fluidity in our thoughts and our way of being and our way of moving, which we had another episode with a bodywork specialist a few weeks ago that we recorded where we were saying the same exact thing. And as you said it also reminded me, like there was a moment earlier in this episode where you said that this beautiful insight for listeners that if you're always settling for, I could make this work, wait for when you have the, this is it, that sometimes you're missing out on the, this is it. And then there was another moment you were talking about your music and you were like, my perfectionist mind wasn't letting me release it and until a certain moment when I started putting it out there. And I think that part of the fluidity is being open to paradox, being open to multiple different possibilities and what's truly appropriate in a given moment. So I don't know that these are relevant observations. They're just what come to my mind as I listen. And I think that that's a deep insight, actually, that's present in many traditions and so on, that like it's important to, maybe it's that stone and water relationship. It's important to be able to not hold on to one side or posture or belief, when it's actually more appropriate to keep flowing and shift into like being open to include another in another context or from another angle. And even like how we relate, let's say after a disaster, or how we organize ourselves into a team. It's like, how can I not stay stuck in my perspective, but take a moment while I'm expressing myself to consider like, what's the experience the other person's having, put myself in their shoes. It's all part of that same flexibility that creates so much more opening for possibility for how we can work in ourselves and together. And those are some of my thoughts about what you've been sharing. So you're welcome to respond. Otherwise, I have some next details I want to touch on with you before we wrap up. So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I appreciate, like, what it feels like is your framing of this just provides another point of exquisite access into the ineffable thing that we're describing. I love the idea that you're talking about, that the paradox can exist. There's the paradox in my example of like there being a struggle or a block in releasing the music, but it also actually not being time to release it. And in this way, leaning into paradox is liberation, because leaning into the Tao, that fact that something can be both at the same time, is a path to really get out of judgment and to then get more into curiosity. And curiosity is what's going to lead someone to interact with their life and their world in ways that they never expected to, which leads to the insights that create new innovations and new ways of being, and is a state of attention and being that we really need a lot of right now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it reminds me of this idea. I think it comes from, I don't know how to say his name, Josh Waitzkin, something like that. The kids,
Yeah,
he was the main character in the chess movie
the art
about.
of learning.
Yeah. And then so it was Searching for Bobby Fischer was the movie, and then he got into like he became a world Tai Chi master, and then he saw he could apply Tai Chi principles to his chess, and then he ditched chess altogether. But there's this idea of how like thematic patterns repeat in different areas, different disciplines, different areas of life, etc. And I think that's in some ways what we're getting at, that there's like a way of relating, a way of being, a posture that can be more supple, that we can assume in body and mind. And it relates to everything. It permeates, it's pervasive, whether it's in our relating with others or with nature, with our own creative process. So yeah, these are good topics. You mentioned wanting to help empower as many people as possible with these tools and insights, practices. And I know we're both writing a book at the moment, which is fun, and something that's interesting to me since we're developing this podcast now is seeing the online projects that you're seem to be optimizing. There's a whole YouTube channel I saw that seems to be doing pretty well, where you're sharing Wim Hof breath work, and I saw you drumming on there, both drummers. All right, I'll stop repeating the parallels, but yeah, there's the platform there. I wanted to hear just a little bit more about how you're going about growing that online channel, and then there's other ways that we share things. And maybe this is a good place to also come full circle to the yoga festivals you helped establish, and so on. Like, what are these different channels and platforms, whether virtual or in person, through which we can all be connecting with these disciplines and these perspectives and sharing them as well?
Sure. So in the proliferation of the goal, it's like in the historical world, you want to get as much face time in front of people as you can, to be able to share meaningful opportunities. But in this world, we've got really cool tools. And during the pandemic, I started a YouTube channel called Convergence Lifestyle, and I started just recording videos of myself playing instruments producing all the music together and then recording myself doing this breath work and giving the instruction, and just started putting them out there. And the response was amazing. Uh, People were, I mean, the thing is like I did that for a couple years, then I stopped because Mandala Springs and Mandala Naturals needed so much work from me, but people kept using the breathwork videos. Those original ones that I put out back then, to this day, people use them every single day. They get hundreds of views per hour, some of the videos. Like they're just, people are doing breathwork with me. And that's the beauty, is I can play these instruments, produce this song, teach the breathwork, put it together one time, and then thousands and thousands of people can continue to do that same breath work every day. That to me encapsulates the magic that's available in the electronic medium. So after years of sadly putting that thing that was building so much momentum aside, I'm very happy to say that I've started making more YouTube videos again. I'm starting to put a lot more energy back into it. And I've got more on the pipeline. I'm back in my like juice and my excitement about making more. And the main thing that has driven it is the breathwork videos. And I'm going to keep doing lots of different kinds of breathwork videos, but I'm also going to be bringing the full convergence. It's convergence lifestyle. It's about the convergence of all of the fun, engaging, holistic tools that can lead to a really active, open, and limitless sort of lifestyle. So I'm going to be making more and more videos that have more of that kind of content as well. And there's definitely some on that channel already. I think it's a lot of fun. That's the beauty of it, is it's like I put a video out there and the world has a choice. They either watch it or they don't. And I can just like let it be, and I can move myself on to the next creation. So for a creator, it's a really invigorating medium to work in. And I'm building online courses around all of this. I updated my website, roblenfesty.com. I got to get everything into the Robbie. Robbie's my original name. Rob was the cut off name that I took in my early 20s, and brought Robbie right back to the front because it's more of the playful essence of the truth of who I am. The playfulness that actually contains the wisdom and the groundedness. So currently there's a lot of things branded under Rob Lenfestey that will become Robbie. But Convergence Lifestyle is the YouTube channel. It's a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun with it. And I recorded a bunch of content in front of cenotes in Mexico recently, and making videos with that right now. So that's a lot of fun.
Beautiful. Well, next time we'll have to ask you more stories about mountain lions, stories about
Wampus cats too, like not just mountain lions. Mon and I have the story about both of us separately seeing the Wampus cat.
Oh yeah,
Keep
right.
that in mind.
Keep that in mind. Okay, well, we'll keep people's appetite teased for the next episode when we're able to get back onto this podcast together. Maybe we'll touch more on the experience of starting yoga festivals around the world as well. If you have any last notes to add here before we conclude, feel free.
Yeah. You know, I just hope that anyone who's out there listening to this or watching it, just experiencing it, my prayer is that you feel inspired, that inspiration is being woken up in some way inside of you for something new, something audacious, something that will require courage, something that's getting you out of your comfort zone, and helps helps people to start or continue with new perspective their journey into their own expanded empowerment in this world. That's really what it's all about, is creating a culture full of creative, wild, primal geniuses out there like yourself. And I'm just grateful that we get to share this space. Looking forward to the next time we get to connect in this medium, and hoping to actually intending to make it into a dialogue where we're going back and forth more. I would really appreciate and love that, to ask you some questions on your own platform and get curious about all the amazing things that you're up to as well.
Yeah, please do. We had another guest who similarly blew us away, blew our minds recently, who said the same thing afterwards, just how much fun he had, but how he wants to start grilling me next time and hearing my thoughts. So we'll have to do that as well. I would be very happy to. And I like the word conspire because it means breathe together, right? Spire, like same as inspiration, and con, like together, right? Like connect. So let's conspire, you and I. After this call, we'll find a moment and we'll plan some things. My visits out there, your visits here. Maybe we'll throw a whole gathering, or keep going global together and online as well. So it'll be a lot of fun, and I'm excited to keep working together. Thank you for sharing your work with us today and all these insights, and just the amazing work that you're doing at Mandala Springs, helping with the hurricane relief after Hurricane Helene. Really important, and I'm glad you're safe, glad you're alive, and helping others stay the same. So not you're not helping others stay the same, you're helping others transform and change, but you're helping them stay alive and well. So
That's right.
yeah, hopefully people got some inspiration. I know I did, and looking forward to reviewing this whole episode and taking some notes again. So much love, brother. It's good to see you.
Much love to you, Yash. Much love to you, everyone. And until next time.
Peace.